Let's talk about a single rainy afternoon back in 1757. An afternoon that didn't just decide one battle, it basically redrew the map of the world. This is the story of the Battle of Plassey, the incredible moment when a private company began its conquest of India and laid the very foundations for the British Empire.
Okay, so let's dive right in because this was not your typical military victory. I mean, not by a long shot. We're going to explore how this seemingly impossible feat was pulled off, not just with guns, but with a whole lot of gold, a tangled web of treachery, and, believe it or not, a conveniently timed rainstorm that changed absolutely everything.
So, to really get our heads around this, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start by setting the scene, looking at the seriously volatile situation in 18th century India that made a clash like this pretty much inevitable. We're kicking things off in the mid-1700s, and you gotta understand, this was a time of massive change and, frankly, instability across the entire Indian subcontinent. The old powers were fading, and new ones were just waiting for their chance to jump in. For centuries, right, the Mughal Empire had been the top dog in India. No question. But by now, that power was seriously crumbling. As the emperor's authority got weaker, these powerful regional governors called Nawabs started acting like kings in their own right. And who sails right into this power vacuum? The Europeans, whose little trading posts were quickly turning into full-blown military fortresses. Now, here's what's so wild. The main players here weren't actually countries. They were two absolute megacorporations, the British and the French East India Companies. And these weren't just businesses trading spices. No way. They were state-sponsored behemoths with their own armies, their own money, and they brought all their bitter European rivalries with them right to the shores of India. So you've got this simmering corporate rivalry, and it's about to boil over into a direct personal conflict between two totally different leaders, right in the heart of Bengal, which happened to be India's richest province. So, in 1756, this young guy, Siraj-ud-Daulah, becomes the new Nawab of Bengal. He's young, he's got a temper, and he is deeply suspicious of these Europeans acting like they own the place. So when the British start beefing up their fort in Calcutta, he sees it as a direct challenge and tells them, knock it off. Well, the British just flat out ignored him. Big mistake. The Nawab wasn't bluffing. He marches his massive 50,000-strong army to Calcutta and takes the city. In the chaos right after the fort fell, a bunch of British prisoners, about 146 of them, were rounded up and shoved into this tiny dungeon. It was a holding cell people called the Black Hole, and it was meant for maybe 4 people, max. By the next morning, only 23 had survived the night. The story of the Black Hole of Calcutta became infamous. Now, the Nawab himself probably didn't even know it was happening, but that didn't matter. The incident became this powerful emotional rallying cry for British revenge, and it was used to justify everything that came next. And this is where Robert Clive steps onto the stage. He was a company man turned soldier, and he was ambitious, brilliant, and completely ruthless. He'd already made a name for himself fighting the French down south, and the company figured he was the perfect man to sort this out. Clive did not waste any time. He sails up to Calcutta and takes it back pretty easily. But he doesn't stop there. He's worried the French will team up with the Nawab, so he marches on and captures their main fort too. This was a huge slap in the face to Siraj-ud-Daulah, an attack on foreign allies in his own territory. He was furious. The Nawab started moving his massive army into position. But Clive was a smart guy. He looked at the numbers and knew a straight-up fight would be suicide. So he decided to turn to a much more powerful weapon: conspiracy. Turns out this was easier than you'd think. The Nawab wasn't exactly popular in his own court. A lot of powerful people were scared of his temper, including his own commander-in-chief, a guy named Mir Jafar. The richest bankers in Bengal, the Jugget Seths, were worried he'd just take all their money. So Clive didn't really have to create a conspiracy. He just had to tap into one that was already brewing. The deal they struck was as simple as it was world-changing. Clive promised to make Mir Jafar the new Nawab. In return, Mir Jafar had to do one little thing: betray his master on the battlefield. Oh, and of course, pay the East India Company a massive sum of money for their trouble. And if you want to know just how ruthless Clive was, check this out. One of the middlemen in the plot tried to blackmail him for a bigger payout. So what does Clive do? He just draws up 2 treaties, a real one on white paper and a fake one on red paper, promising the guy everything he wanted.
It was an absolutely masterful piece of deception to keep the whole plot from falling apart. So, with the secret deal signed and sealed, Clive starts marching his small army north. He was heading for a showdown in a field near a village called Plassey, setting the stage for one of the most important and frankly weirdest battles in all of history. I mean, just look at these numbers. It's ridiculous. The Nawab's army was this gigantic force that completely dwarfed Clive's tiny, professional army of British soldiers and Indian sepoys. On paper, this shouldn't have been a battle. It should have been an execution. The day started with a huge cannon duel, but Clive was smart. He had his men take cover in a thick mango grove, which protected them. And then, the weather changed everything. A massive monsoon downpour soaked the battlefield. Here's the key. The Nawab's army hadn't protected their gunpowder. It was ruined. The British, on the other hand, had brought tarps. Thinking the British cannons were as useless as his own, one of the Nawab's only loyal generals, Mir Madan, charged forward. He ran straight into a perfectly preserved volley of British fire and was killed. So, with Mir Madan down and panic starting to spread, you have to ask the million-dollar question. Where was the commander-in-chief, Mir Jafar, the guy in charge of a huge chunk of the army?
He was right where he was supposed to be, on the sidelines, doing absolutely nothing. He and the other conspirators just held their troops back. When the Nawab saw his best general dead and realized his other commanders were traitors, he lost his nerve, hopped on a camel, and fled. And once their leader was gone, it was over. The battle was a rout, and the casualty numbers tell the whole story. This wasn't really a battle. It was a betrayal. The British had fewer than 100 casualties, which just proves the fight was won long before anyone even picked up a weapon. All right, so the battle is won. Now what happens? Well, this is where the victory on the field gets turned into the foundation of an actual empire. This is the real corporate takeover. Siraj-ud-Daulah was caught and executed a few days later. And just as he was promised, Mir Jafar was put on the throne. But he very quickly learned that his new crown came with a lot of British strings attached. He was a king in name only, a puppet whose real job was to make the East India Company richer. And this right here, this is the playbook for how it all happened. Step 1, install your puppet. Step 2, get rid of your other European competitors like the Dutch. And then step 3, the final masterstroke. In 1765, they get the Diwani, the right to collect all of Bengal's taxes. At that point, they were the rulers of Bengal in everything but name. So why do we still talk about this one battle? Because it wasn't just the end of a small local conflict. It was the explosive start of a whole new era for both India and Britain. It was the dawn of the British Raj. See, with all the money from Bengal's taxes pouring in, the East India Company basically had an infinite war chest. It was no longer just a trading firm. It had become a self-funding imperial machine. It used Bengal's money to build a bigger army, kick the French out for good, and start the 100-year process of conquering the rest of India. Which brings us to one last big question. When you look at all the facts, the conspiracy, the betrayal, the backroom deals, was the Battle of Plassey really a great military victory? Or was it something else, a hostile corporate takeover that just happened to take place on a battlefield? The way you answer that really defines the beginning of an empire.